Okay. Well, you can't blame the seller if anything got damaged here, because this looks extremely well packed. Okay, so I love how easy the seller made this to unpack. And it says pull here, and so this is going to start to unwind. Okay, so far so good. Start unraveling here. Very, very nice packing by the seller. Thank you for taking the time to pack it well. Everything arrived in tip-top shape. So we'll get this on the bench and see what we have. See what's working and what's not working, and go from there. So stay tuned. All right, so let's see what we have to work with here. The case has some dings in it, scratches, but you know, that's still okay. So let's open this up. So the keyboard looks good. There were no cracks in it, but on closer inspection, I see that there's no cracks in it. Just like some minor wear and tear defects, which is normal. The spacebar has some yellowing. You can see it on the sides there, so we'll retrofit the spacebar. It's just weird on these keyboards. The spacebar seems to yellow more than the keys, or in light of the keys not yellowing, the spacebar usually comes in yellow. So we'll retrofit that and we'll clean this up. So this looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and turn this thing on. Comes with the keyboard cable, which is great. And as usual, damage on one of the corners. It just seems to be the norm with these things, but doesn't affect the performance any, so that's good. So let's see about plugging this in and turning this on. And see what we've got to work with. I was told that the screen is blank, so that's what I'm going to expect. But key elements here is take a look at the disk drive. Make sure the disk drive spins. Love getting these. I have a ton of 1541s and I love getting these, but especially for the 64s. So, all right. Go ahead and turn this thing on, and let's watch the disk drive. Make sure that it spins, turns red, and stops. We'll look at the screen, see if there's well, on these you don't really see a flicker on the screens because it's an LCD, it's a CRT screen that takes a little while to warm up. So, okay, so that's good. The disk drive whirred and stopped. And yeah, I'm getting a blank screen, but it works. The screen is in working order. And brightness works. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the CRT. All right, so a blank screen usually points to the PLA. So we'll start there and pull the PLA and start testing that first. So let me get this thing opened. I think you already know the drill. The 2 screws in the back on each side, 2 screws on the top. Well, hell, let me just go through it real quick here. No big deal. it's another couple of minutes of video. You can always fast forward, right? So 2 screws from the top, 2 screws on each of the little side thingamajiggies. That's what I call them, thingamajiggies. That'll slide out, and that'll expose the 3 screws on each side inside. Took it the wrong screw. I don't know what I'm thinking. There's 3 screws on each side on the top. This one's missing the middle screw. Interesting. So this has been opened before. There's only 2 screws on that side. Don't know if you caught it also. There's some little spider webs here. But the original turquoise caps are both in place on the handle as well, so that's good. So for the most part, this isn't that bad, even with the small little dents and scratches. We'll just clean this up. It should clean up okay. Okay. All right. So we'll get to the PLA. I'm going to turn this camera around here and be right back. Okay, so let's see about getting this PLA out of here. So, you know, a couple of schools of thought to this. You know, I've been asked, why don't you just take the card out instead of going? You could take the card out to get you easier access to the PLA, but you'd have to unplug a bunch of stuff. You have to take out these 3, and look, there's one missing. So someone's obviously tried to fix this because there's a pin missing in the middle here. So between the screw being missing on the side and a pin being missing here, obviously someone's been in it. And I'm looking at the PLA, and it looks like that looks like a Phillips PLA, and I really haven't seen many of these come with a Phillips PLA. Not to say that it's not the original, but nonetheless, I'm thinking someone might have already replaced the PLA and tried it, but we're going to test the PLA, and if that tests okay, then we're going to test the SID chip as well, because sometimes the SID can mess up can cause a white screen as well. So okay, see how much easier that was for me to pull this PLA than to take the board out. Okay. All right, so let's get the tester, and we'll take it from there. So give me a second. Okay, so got my tester here, and it should already be set for PLA. Okay. PLA is good. Okay, so let's test the SID chip next. After the SID chip comes the kernel. So put this aside for a second. And this is one of the better chips. I can tell they replaced this. But I'm going to, I have a lot of CMOS chips, I know, and they wear out with time. But I'm going to take this really good chip out and just replace it with a known good CMOS chip, just because I want to start, you know, liquidating my CMOS inventory, so to speak. So I'm going to swap chips, so you're going to see a different chip being put in there. Okay, so we're going to put this PLA chip aside there. Let's just take the SID chip out now, test that. Okay, so there's the SID. Let's go ahead and test that now. Yeah, bad SID. Yeah, well, it kind of sucks because, like I said, it's the most expensive chip, but we got replacements for it. Just going to reseat this and retest it just in case. And just because a chip tests bad like this is bad across the board, I don't immediately toss it. So I'll double check it on a known working system before it gets tossed into the bad IC chip bin, but that doesn't look promising as it is. So let's replace this guy. I'm going to put it aside. Okay, and I'm going to replace it with an ARM SID. So first things first, let's replace the PLA. We'll put this back. Well, someone was obviously in here and they replaced the PLA, thinking that what causes a black screen, you know, on the norm. So that's what they replaced. But I think they stopped there and they just didn't go far enough in testing the SID or the kernel. All right. All right. Time, moment of truth here. Okay, we still have a blank screen. All right, so we replaced the SID, we replaced the PLA. So let's go after the kernel next. Hopefully we'll stop there. And it's not the VIC chip. That's not the end of the world. If it is, we'll just have to take that board out. Okay. Well, that's too bad. Okay, so normally here, I would just go ahead and take out the kernel because it's right across from the SID chip, and I don't normally have to take this board out, but let's go ahead and take this board out and test the VIC first, just so I can show you how the board comes out. So for this board, we're going to take this board out in order to get to the VIC chip. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to unplug these two cables here, and we're going to, there's only two of these little black rivets because the third one is missing here. So I'm going to take those out, and then the board should slide, and then we have to basically unplug it. So this has to move this way to get unplugged from the main board here as well. So you don't want to lose that piece. Okay. Slide this. Now, in order to slide this out here, you also have to take out the pin. I forgot, that's right here as well. Okay, that allows that to slide. All right, so that popped out of its connector there. Okay, so to make this easier, I'm going to now take the two bottom screws, the screws out of the bottom here to let this come out. Okay, now that the bottom screws are gone out, just let it time out. Now that I've pulled this out a little bit, there's the power plug that's on the back end here. this out like this. It'll be easier. There's the power plug right there. Okay. All right. Okay. There you go. All right. So now let's start testing. So we have the VIC. Okay, now the VIC should just pop right out along with the heat sink here. Okay. Getting into the socket there. No, that wasn't so bad. There was very little paste. Okay. So I wonder if they've already tried to replace the VIC-2 chip as well prior, because there's no paste on it. Yeah, VIC-2's fine. Okay. Okay, there we go. I don't have to worry about that later. All right. Okay. So ROMs are next. Notice this one has 24 pins instead of 28. So you start with the back pins. So the the 4 front pins will be the ones that are open. So if you have a board like this, always populate from the back first. Okay. So let's get this one out of here. Okay, so let's set this guy up. So it's the basic ROM, a kernel ROM, a character ROM. Okay. Doubt it'll be this one, but you never know. Yep, that's good. No surprise there. Let's do the kernel ROM next. Failed. Okay. Yep. I could go ahead and test this guy here as well, but I'm pretty sure that kernel ROM is the culprit. So let's go ahead and replace that. Okay, so we've got a new replacement ROM, kernel ROM here. So I'm going to put this guy aside. I would replace it with a Jiffy DOS kernel ROM, but I put the ultra reset switches in here, which is the Jiffy DOS, kernel, the drive ROM, the reset, and all this other stuff. So I'll wait to replace this when and if I put the ultra reset switch in here. But for now, I have so many of these already that I've taken out when putting in the Jiffy DOS ROMs that we'll go ahead and just use this for now, just to get this thing going again. And let's hope that it's nothing else besides this. Obviously the SID was bad, but which kind of sucks, but this guy will at least hopefully get this thing going. And you notice that this took up all 28 pins. So it's one of the originals. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get this board back in and keep our fingers crossed. So first thing we want to do is get the power back. You want to make sure that this slides. There's a little notched area underneath. You want to make sure that it's in that notched area, and it should kind of slide back and forth here. And so we're going to line up the little pin things here. Before we do that and put the pins and everything in, I'm just going to go ahead and plug this guy back in. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to screw this back plate back to give me some support. Okay, now that I got this back plate back on, I'm going to slide this back into its connector. Whoa. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and turn this guy back on. And see if that did the trick before we put everything, all the pins back. Okay, got everything plugged in. All right. Okay, moment of truth. There we go. Got your working screen again. So was the kernel ROM. And that's typical. I mean, we went through an exercise of looking at the VIC-2 and all that stuff. I mean, it was just as easy, would have been just as easy to pull the kernel ROM out because it's sitting like right there. But at least you got to see how to take that board out. So in order of priority, when you have a blank screen here, start off with PLA. And then look at the SID. Because it's so easy to take out, it's right next to it. And then look at the kernel ROM, which is the chip in the middle of the three ROMs there. And, and that's barring that, that your drive was working, okay? So, because then you have your disk ROM and all this other stuff. But in this case, those three. And then if it's still not adequate with those three chips, and those three chips are fine, then take a look at the VIC. Not that it's difficult to take out, it's just that you don't need to take this board out to take the ROM, the SID, and the PLA out if you didn't want to. Otherwise just take the whole board out and just start testing the chips. Now, some might say, hey, I cheat because I use a tester, but I do so many of these that it just wouldn't make sense not to have a tester. I must have at least 4 dozen Commodore 64s, a dozen 64 C64s, 64Cs. I got at least a dozen of these. So there's a lot of testing that I do in order to get, and the majority of them I get non-working. So hence the tester. But if you don't have a tester, because the testers are expensive, it's 150 bucks for that thing, right? The other optimum way that you can test chips is to have a working C64 that's socketed with the main chips. And then if it's working, then you can take each chip that you take out of here and substitute it with the chip that's working on the working board. And then you'll see if the working board fails because that chip which is just substituted in, then you know that chip was bad. So then you know you got to push that chip in, and then so you can use a working Commodore as your test bed for chips as well. So keep that in mind. Okay, since we already had this thing apart, let's before we truly wrap this up, let's go ahead and I'm going to just go ahead and put a dia cartridge in here and turn this puppy on. And let's just wait till we get to the SID just to make sure that we got sound. All right, so there you have it. Another working SS-64. I'm not going to bother with checking the keyboard in this video. Let's keep this video relatively short. If there's something up with the keyboard, I'll make another video out of it. You see the bad ports on here because I don't have a harness hooked up to it. But like I said, the worst case scenario is that there's something up with the keyboard. Usually it's the membrane. And I think I already have a video on that, on how to replace the membrane on the SX-64 keyboard. So, but we're going to wrap this up to keep this video relatively short. Bottom line, kernel ROM. So there you have it. So hope you got something out of this. Even if I made weird choices on how to test, everybody has their style and their way to do it. But at least you got to see, how to take a board out. The priority of the chip testing, PLA, SID or kernel, either one. But the SID may surprise you because I think I have a video where the SID chip was bad and that was causing the black screen. And in this case, the SID chip was bad because we tested it. And like I said before, again, I will test all the chips that seem bad in a working computer just in case. But obviously the kernel was bad because the computer came back to life. But the SID I will be testing on a working computer just to double check because that is one expensive chip. So hope you got something out of this, even if it's the weird way I go about testing. And hey, like I always say, enjoy life. You only live once, live for every minute, because it is short. So there you have it. Peace out.